There we go.
I don't know how these died and then everything else.
That'll do it. That'll do it.
I mean, I've been wanting to do this since I was really young. You know, I read a shit ton when I was a kid, and I loved movies. And as a child of the 80s, I wasn't into TV that much because outside of the stuff that you caught in syndication, like Wild Wild West and, and whatnot, I preferred film. And what was fun is at the time, late at night, we didn't have cable, but PBS would show uncut movies from the 60s and 70s late. And so you'd go down to the basement or whatever and see your mom and dad's movies or your grandpa's movies, which was a ton of fun. And ultimately, I was a consumer first. And at a certain point, you're like, I want to do that, right? And then you write that first screenplay when you're 13. And you give it to mom, and mom is brutal in her notes.
Right. It's always moms, isn't it? Yeah. I feel like my mom was the same way. Like,
but very encouraging still. And then you go back later in life and you see her notes, and you're like, oh man, mom must be pretty loved with me there. Right?
Yeah, like, did mom used to be a studio executive? Because these are really good.
Right.
When everyone's process is different,
Yeah.
That's the other thing too, is we've all read books and we've gone to various symposiums and gone down the rabbit hole of what is the best way. And to be honest, there isn't one that's universal.
No, and that's the thing, right? We all have our own process. And that's kind of the fun of, I think, what we're trying to do with this podcast is just go, everybody has their own process, and maybe you'll take something from ours and go, I like that. Maybe they'll take something from yours. My first question for you is, and we've been asked the same thing over the podcast, is how do you come up with an idea? Do you have a specific way? Do you take
where do ideas come from?
Well, Jake and I will actually take entire days and just go, let's just throw shit against the wall and maybe we'll find a good idea. And then
it's no different than that, I'd say for me, in the digital age, it's hard to get away from noise. And so a lot of times it's turn off the phone, go for long walks, and just start thinking about the stories I love and my, looking around the world you inhabit going, what, because when I was a little kid, I thought that every gun store a la Commando had a secret button that had like a war chest behind the wall. Right?
Yeah.
And so to me, it's always the world build there. I think when it comes to lead characters, it's always someone who leans into empathy. Mm-hmm. And that I would argue that the world may call a certain character an anti-hero, but you write him as a hero because he's your hero,
Do you start with a character, do you think, most of the time?
This one I did this week, it was with the idea of a job that we all know in the real world and shifting as to what it might look like in the underworld, and that was fun. And a lot of, and then the character that came into it was an actor I had been talking with, and I was like, I think this is for them, and then you get there and then you kind of think, okay, you don't want to repeat yourself, but it's still in the genre mold. So you really have about 12 to 15 characters to choose from. Which one are you going to do? And honestly, it's an infinite number of characters when you start, taking elements of each and kind of like snowballing. But that's where that one came from. But also when you think of even back to the first John Wick, we were not babysitting. We were dog sitting my neighbor's new puppy. Oh. And the puppy was a half corgi, half Chihuahua. It was a Chorgi, which is a miniature corgi, black, tricolor, black, brown, white.
Right. And a bunch of Russian guys came in and shot the dog, and you were like, this is the start of a movie.
Yeah. Right. And I went after them and got murdered right away,
Oh, my gosh.
But like I said, I always have a pillow on my lap, and the puppy was laying on the pillow. And ironically, the puppy's name is in the original script. It's Moose, M-U-S, which I think Dutch means little. And so it's like Moose Little. And that's where I was like, what would happen if someone murdered my dog? That's where that came from.
That's awesome.
Isn't that funny that it's this nugget? What if?
It's a question.
It's a question.
Starts with a question, doesn't it?
Yeah.
What if there was a guy like this?
Yeah.
What if there was what if this happened on a plane? What if, it's usually that question, isn't it?
Well, it's like, again,
Yeah.
you guys have known me for a long time, but like I grew up watching everything, but I loved that, Cloak and Dagger was a great movie, and we all loved as a kid, because what if your imaginary friend was based on the relationship you wish you had with your dad? It was like, how a movie is awesome, and then at a certain age, and then you watch it later in life, you're like, oh, I missed all of that, like what this movie was really about,
Sure.
And I think that's the magic, is what we came from. But when you look at that, it's either, because action scenes are action scenes. I've never began a script with that. We all have kind of our back pocket ideas that we'd like to throw in somewhere, but usually it's the look, the feel, appeal of a world. It's a character, it's a situation, or it's doing your take on a fill in the blank.
Totally. That's
then,
a lot of times, yeah.
When you've got some of those things starting to kind of foment in your mind, what's the next step for you? Like, what does that look like? At what point do you express that on a page? In what form does that take? Does it not? Is it just still verbal? What's the
for me, if I'm going to spec something, I just immediately go to the script. I type in a fade in, and I work 100% in the script on that spec. That's just the way I do it.
And do you know like where you're going, or are you just letting the story drive it for you?
No, there's a reason. Like when first drafts, no one reads outside of Sonia. And on top of that,
for everyone.
The hardest part too is like genre. Like I love genre, man. And genre usually has a short first act or a very long first act. I want to say that, usually a very short first act is kind of like a horror movie, when you think about it.
Interesting.
Or can, anyway. Or you have something like Man on Fire we all love. I think that first act is like an hour 10.
It's so long.
Really long.
And it's the best part of the movie.
Yeah.
So when I spec, I just go there. But I do a lot of pitching in regards to IP, or I've got an idea, or when you're working with an actor, especially, you don't want to go to script right away, because then they don't quite know or the tone of voice or that character.
Right.
So what I do is I go direct to treatment. And treatment to me is usually a 12 to 30 page document, depending on how into the minutiae you are and how important it may be to you or the reader. I would say half to 2/3 of that document is the first act, because I sold Canyon to Alcon, and that's with Davis and Stein, and there's a section in the middle of the second act where it's like, look, we know what happens here. It's these things that I'm going to do, this kind of action sequence and that kind of stuff. Not saying I'm not going to gloss it over, but it's like, this is the stuff you don't have to pitch. We get that,
Gotcha.
And then it's like, now let's go to the third act, right? So it's really kind of doing it in such a way, especially for an actor, to then go like, I see the roadmap. Let's go to the draft.
Right.
But it's also like, even talking with you guys about certain projects, it's do you spec from the page in final draft? Do you go to the treatment, or do you work on the pitch?
Yeah.
What I would say is, you guys are great pitchers, but
Our scripts suck.
can't believe you've gone this far, man. Audience, mom and dad, I don't know. But no, I think, to me, I can pitch, but it's not my strongest point. I don't really like doing it. It exhausts me. But what I'm good at is going, hey, here's the treatment, or if it's television, here's the pilot, and here's a page on episode 2, and here's where I think the season's going, and here's where the show could go. Now, can I go write it? Now, I will also say I have the earned luxury of, I've got some stuff that got made and did okay.
Yeah.
When I go in, they're coming into that from the standpoint and the filter of, oh, he did stuff, people trusted him, and it paid off. So I know I'm in a different place.
Sure.
But I still think that the grand irony is, we're writers here, and we're expected to do the little dance, right?
Yeah.
And we've all known people who are awful in pitches because they're just they're nervous. Dude, honestly, the first time I did it for the first year, I had the whole script up in front of me, not on a screen, we weren't zooming then, but
we bring our iPads in.
Yeah, I had to. It's just, but now, like they're like, we've it's like maybe it's the 10,000 hour rule. Now, if you sat me down and just said, pitch me a take on this, cool, let's riff, because you're just on your own skin, and that's the game, you know?
Yeah. So, all right, let's say you've got this idea, you think it's really cool. It is going to be a spec screenplay, because that's what we're doing here. And, our process is we tend to do a really deep outline. I think that really has to do a lot with the fact that we're in a partnership. And so it helps us get on the same page. If you're diving into that first draft and you're just going fade in, bah, is there any point during that first draft where you go, oh, fuck, I didn't think about that? And like have to go back and then like change everything on like page 5 from, or do you just go, I'm just going to get to the end and then hand it off to Sonia and then see what happens?
Well, I think every story is different, but honestly, I like simple stories. Those are the ones I watch. Even the ones that people are convinced are complex, like The Usual Suspects of the world. He lied. That's the reveal. That's the
right. Yeah.
Or even going back in time and watching Total Recall as a kid and negotiating or just debating, was it in his head or did it really happen? And then you're an adult, you see the movie, you're like, it's all in his fucking head. Like, I mean, it's right there, Yeah. But I think for me, the best movies are kind of like the old NES video games, right? You're going from one boss level to the next and pausing to buy something from a weird wizard somewhere, to enhance your sword or what have you. And once you get all those elements in play, I love having heart and love having humor. But, as you guys can attest, especially in the buyerscape, you send them a script. If it's 88 to 94 pages, they're going to read it, right? If it's 140, I don't care who you are, that they know something's wrong. Yeah. Unless you're like, okay, look, there's a lot of history in there. It's an epic, blah, blah, blah. No, and I think to me, my first drafts tend to be long because of 2 reasons. I use a lot of ellipses because it helps me think, and it gives me margins in there for Sonia to write. I use a lot of cut twos and fade twos and POVs and stuff. That's for her and me. And it's actually for the reps as well, because if you think of having those gaps, it becomes kind of like this a pacing thing. When we get to the final draft, most all of that gets out unless you really want it, because I don't want to tell the director what to do.
Right.
And I rarely use like pan and tilt unless it's really important,
Yeah.
But I think to me, I like getting the first draft out, but I spend most of my time on the first act because that's what gives you a movie. But I'll also probably admit your favorite scenes in any movie tend to take place in the second act. And I want to say it's either it's a magical mystery tour as to what works and what doesn't,
Yeah.
So
one of the things I think we really learned, we read a draft of John Wick when it was still called Scorn. And I think, were inspired by the pacing of your action. In fact, we, adopted it as our own in The Princess. We were like, we want this to read as fast-paced as possible. And what I think what we always like so much about your writing, if you'll let me praise you for a moment, is that it just feels like you're watching a movie. Right. I think that's what's so great about it. It's going to go, but not only in the way that it's described, but actually in your use of ellipses and white space. And it's almost like, and I love this, it's not a criticism, like you don't write in like full sentences, like they kind of merge on into the next bit, and then he does this, and then this happens, and then this, and you were kind of like you had to keep reading this thing, and you were in this sequence, just like John Wick in that moment, and had to keep going because it was that,
To me, that's a lot of that isn't from screenwriting or movies. It was from reading books from like Alistair MacLean and Dashiell Hammett, and then in the 80s with Tom Clancy, when he would really go into the action and write prose, Like, I think that's important. And in fact, some of the greatest backhanded, what would you call it, backhanded compliment I've ever received is a studio head, turning a script back in going, that's pretty good, to his assistant. And he had X'd through all of the action, and he had written on the script, I got it, something like punching and kicking. And his assistant said, dude, read it. And he came back, he's like, oh, and so I think that's the other thing too, is the greatest joy I have is not everything you write in a script makes it to screen, not especially in the action space, but when you see one little thing, even if it's just one in the sequence, you're like, oh, there it is. Because for the most part, it primes the pump for the second unit. All the stunt guys, and I love those guys.
Dude,
they feed me as much as I feed them, if not more so.
It's the hairpin in the opening scene of The Princess.
Yeah.
You know, it's that, oh yeah, I love that moment. So how many drafts would you say you do before you give it to, let's say, your reps, or before
I'll go, since we all know these people, I'll just go by their positions. But like, first is Sonia and I, until we get to the place where, she's like, yeah. Second is Josh Adler, who's my manager. Same. Once we get him done, I loop in the rest of my APA team, which is Cheryl, Debbie, Kyle, and Lucy. And then they luckily all compile and aggregate their notes. And they also know by the time it gets to them, it's been through two pretty fierce gatekeepers.
Right.
And yet each of those people bring in that perspective shift. And again, you don't have to address every note. I mean, I always, like, I'm pretty good with grammar. These guys are fucking amazing. So they'll catch things where I'm like, this last thing, it was like, is it embedded or embedded? IM or EM? And I'm like,
oh, it's EM.
I didn't know there was a difference. Like, I just had no idea, I was just typing, that word came out. But then the other thing too is, for lack of a better turn of phrase, when you turn a script, you kind of want to have a couple of hanging chads in there, not as like, not as traps, but as places to go, like, look, there is a divergent path in this scene or these characters and this action and this heartbeat that I'm going to leave in there as divergent, so that when you're talking to producer, studio, buyer, we know that's what we're talking about, and we can come to which, if we go left or right together. How
do you do that though? I mean, that's that's really interesting, but I can't.
Well, like in this last draft, there was this notion of what happens if an innocent is killed, and it's a sci-fi movie, and it was an awesome question, and I never really gave it much thought because I didn't think it was happening. But then you kind of looked at it as like, do you remember that Fast and Furious where they stole this safe?
Yeah,
and dragging it down.
Actually, my favorite one.
Yeah, and you're like, I think thousands of people died. Everyone getting coffee is gone. I mean, it's Fast and Furious, right? It's one of those things that, like, I'm not going to, and I always talk to the person giving the note, going, dude, good note. I'm not going to address it, but I've written it down so that if it comes up, that's something we can chat about. But also, it's the kind of thing that you want a director, an actor, someone else to kind of to lean into, because their answer, I think, is going to be better than mine. I'm so far into the woods sometimes I'm not seeing the trees.
Totally.
So it's almost like purposefully having a beat where it could bring a note, but that you want someone to give a note because it like makes them more invested, or it makes
it also sometimes I don't know the answer. I have some options, and yet look, I don't think that we talk about this a lot, but I don't think a script is biblical or canonical, especially when you're trying to get cool shit made with cool people. You got to be malleable, you got to be flexible. Right. There's something in there that can be flexible, and to said marketplace, to said talent pool, to said just getting it made. I don't want to go too far as it's my way or the highway.
Totally. Also, the other thing you could do is at the end of each scene, you go, if you want John Wick to kill the man, turn to page 54. If you want him to kiss the man, turn to page 73.
Wow.
Mike.
Dude, I've seen. What was it Bandersnatch? What was
Yeah.
Randall, so we were just talking about
Dude,
it the other day.
I've seen that script. Like, man, those guys are geniuses, are insane.
I know, right? It's one or the other. It's one or the other.
Right.
I guess my question for you is, and of course, after all that stuff is done and you get notes, what's your approach to notes?
The first thing is just making sure that you're getting all the notes at once, that there's an aggregation occurring. Because a lot of times, if that doesn't happen, you're going to get, 2 different notes on one topic, or one section, and you're going to think to yourself, okay, who am I listening to? And sometimes you don't want to listen to the better idea because the more powerful person has the lesser idea, right?
Right.
But that hasn't happened in a long time because I just try to get everyone on the same page together. And a lot of that is through Adler and team at APA of going, let's get it all in one place and let's have a clear roadmap moving forward.
Right.
I would say that outside of going through all the various gatekeepers, in the past, 5-6 years, I haven't really faced like let's blow it all up. Actually, a couple of projects, but I'm gonna just bite myself in the ass there. But I'm saying most of them, by the time we get there, it's like, yeah, I see it all.
Okay.
And
well,
one of
you're
the
lucky.
you guys have faced, I'm sure, but if I have a scene that I like, but I don't quite think is working in the screenplay, but I'm like, maybe it'll pass. It never passes Sonia.
Right.
She knows. She's like, look, I like this too, but it's the pacing, the tone's off. To just have them do this or just remove the scene and get it home,
She's a good editor in that way. You've got that person. But what if, all right, I know you're saying it doesn't happen often, but have you ever been on that Zoom now or in that notes meeting where the most important person in the room gives you a note and you're like, that's terrible. And that's going to ruin everything.
I think it's always you take a breath when you hear something like that and just let them keep going. You don't want to interject with positive or negative because I would argue 100% of the time, it's not what's first said in the note. It's what comes after it where you realize, oh, that's what's important to them, So we're human. We lead initially with how we address that thing they want. And if you just let them talk and listen through, you realize why they want that thing. And then you're like, oh, there's the why. Let's focus on the why. And ultimately, by focusing on the why, their idea might not seem so bad because now you understand the why and you can actually tilt it that 3% shift. But a lot of times, like, I'm not going to be that guy on any Zoom saying, well, that's fucking terrible or that's genius. You just need to talk it through and, and just kind of see why they said that in the first place.
Yeah.
And once you understand why, you're like, cool, that's something we can work with.
I think it's really interesting because the phrase you hear a lot is, what's the note behind the note? But I actually prefer the way you phrase it, which is why. Why do you want that moment to happen there? Oh, well, because I think we need an emotional moment or whatever it is.
And I like what you're saying about the follow-up of the why, Jake, which is that not only is it, the why, but if you know the why, then actually most of the time you can figure out how they got to their idea and try and make that idea work for them because you understand what they're trying to do with the idea. Yeah. That's a really interesting way to approach it.
And there was something that Josh, our joint manager, talked about that I think me and Ben really heard recently, which is, and I've heard you say this on calls, and you'll laugh because you'll feel seen, which is, what I like about that idea is, but it's so true. Yeah, because you go, I hear you. There is something in there. I perceive the why. Maybe it's not that version that you're pitching, Mr. Producer, Mr. Executive, even Mr. Actor. Maybe Mrs. Wife, but what I like there is this
is like when people say that, is like, let's look at a sequence of events in a screenplay as a pizza, right? Usually 100% that note is one slice of the pizza, right? So like you can say like, fuck the whole pizza shit, but like it's one slice. And so to me, it's going deeper into why is that note? And ultimately, if you go to the why 100%, you go to the why together, it isn't that initial idea was bad. It's like that was the knee-jerk reaction to that, at its core.
Totally.
What I would also say is the two things that when certain questions come up, you either just have a character answer it before it's asked, it's the classic Gremlins of it all, where it's like, hey, they hate sunlight, don't get them wet, and don't feed them after midnight. That if you were a father of a child getting that pet, you'd be like, no fucking thank you. That makes no sense at all. just something,
Right.
But I think too, the other one is if it isn't working, take it out, because as soon as you take it out, you will either, if there's no connective tissue needed, great, and if it is needed, you'll figure it out. We talked through this even on The Princess. There we're seeing is that we were desperately trying to make work that ultimately we're like, guys, cut it out together, the three of us. Now let's see what it looks like. And once that little fucker was gone, we're like, oh, thank God. You know what I'm saying? Like, and again, the better idea came into the vacuum created. Doesn't always work that way, but a lot of times, if you're in this together, the classic, I say all the time, iron sharp desire, best idea wins. It comes into fray, man.
No, that's totally cool. I'm gonna ask you one last question because I know we told you it would only be 30 minutes, so I'm not gonna hold you to anything longer. But something that someone asked us recently was, what do you do when you don't know where to go? Whether you call it writer's block or whether you call it like I'm just stuck in a place, and when do you know like when to put the script down or when to keep pushing through? How long do you keep trudging through that endless swamp?
I think it's funny because I think when you become like where we are as professional writers, this is paying the bills. How fucking cool is that, right?
Yeah, right.
That happens to us in the rewrite. That happens to us in the polish, because it's like taking a class that you hated in high school. You just don't want to open the goddamn file because you just don't have it in you. That to me is the hardest thing. And that's the thing I'm still trying to figure out how to do. Ultimately you just have to put a gun to your own head and say, do the work, right? Just do the work. Now, I think from inception phase, the first thing you have to realize is it's not a failure on your part. If you wrote 20, 40, 60 pages in and didn't know where to go, you wrote fucking 20, 40, and 60 pages in. Every page you and I write, we get better at what we do. So don't think that was a failure on your part that you couldn't tell that story, because by doing the pages, you sharpened your sword to get on to the next thing, and that might be the one that gets out. I've never gone back to any of the orphans I've got. I always call I call the screenplays that I finish orphans. I call the how you got a scene in a movie a screenplay that you love, but you're like, it's not working, so you cut it and you put it I've always put it at the bottom of the file. I've never gone back to them. I've got thousands of those orphans somewhere on way too many files, right? But I would never look at it as failure. You got to that page. Just because you didn't finish that doesn't mean you didn't fuck up. You started it, you got there, you recognize that you don't know where to go, and then what you do is you sit down and you write fade in and you try it again. And again, to me, I know a lot of writers who don't like writing. And I think ultimately that isn't out the gate. You get to the point of attrition where it does get tough, but ultimately, even here, the joy is that blank page where no one's harping in your ear. No one's looking over your shoulder. You're all alone, either listening to music, or I just listen to what do you call it? An air purifier in the corner that just gives me this drum.
Some white noise.
Noise. And you're alone, and you're with your best friend in your head saying, let's go here. So I think I've answered that, but I never want anyone to think that that's a failure.
Yeah. I really like that. I really respond to that. And I've never thought about it that way. Mm-hmm. I've always thought about it as I was trying to do this thing and I got stuck and I failed, rather than, and I say this a lot, that there is value in everything. And I've never really fully seen up until this moment the value in giving up on a screenplay or giving up on a project, other than, you know what you were doing with this? You were sharpening a sword.
Well, and on top of it too, when you think of it too, when you look at those screenplays, right? You get to page 40. You have a plot, you got a character, primary, secondary, tertiary, and you got a world. Ultimately, there's something in there that if you love an element of it or think that there's something there, you rip it out. You surgically remove it and go play with it elsewhere. I mean, I've never read the old, initial drafts of Star Wars, but I'm under the impression, like seeing some of the artwork, you're like, who's that dude?
Yeah,
right?
That's Luke Starkiller. I don't know who that is.
Yes,
Like, what was it? I can't remember. Again, you might know it better, but like Han Solo and Chewbacca were like at one of the drafts were one character, or like that kind of thing. And they're like, oh, let's make it two. Like that's I think what happened is he saw something there, but recognized it as, would make it better is this. I mean, even like the Coen brothers, I can't remember what movie it was, but they were writing a movie, and then I think it was Miller's Crossing, and they had writer's block, so they wrote Barton Fink, which was about writer's block, and then went back to Miller's Crossing, something like that.
Yeah, sure.
And by the way, that it's still a genius movie that I don't have any idea what it's about. But I think too is, again, the takeaway from that question is every page you write is a success, man.
I like that.
I hear that
a lot. Yeah, we've definitely had moments where we haven't finished. We've gotten 60, sometimes even 70 pages in, and we just don't know how to. We can't get through we're going. It's not working. We don't know exactly why it's not working. There's an ending that we thought was going to work, but it doesn't work anymore. And after hitting our heads against the wall for hours, we just go, we got to put it down.
Right.
And it's hard to not look at that as a failure. But I love that you're absolutely right. Not only is that sharpening the sword, but then all of those ideas now live in your brain.
Yeah.
And without even necessarily reading them again, they come out. Like the good ones stay. The bad ones just kind of like go away. But the good ones that you did come up with in those pages, they sit there. And then they might come out through even subconsciously in future work.
But that's also part of the reason that even when we work on The Princess or a couple of the other things we're working on now, moving forward, you find yourself copying scenes from bad movies, but it was a great scene.
Yeah.
Or it's a weird, like, it's just like, kind of like the scene in there.
Yeah.
Right? Ooh, and that to me is elementary. And it's just where we can geek out on,
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Well, we should let you go because we know you've got writing to Dude, on all of the 943 projects that you currently have in development.
I know, really.
Nice. I'm just going to start. I'm going to take my own advice and just stop writing all of them and start over.
Start over. Throw them all away. Start over.
Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, thanks so much, Derek.
This awesome. And thanks for being on. And we'll, I'm sure we'll be talking very soon.
Yeah, actually, give me a shout out.
We will.
Yes, absolutely. Bye, Derek. Thank you.
Bye. He's such a dude. I love Derek.
I love Derek.
He's just, and I always, I remember we were at New York Comic Con, and I was coming back in a cab with Josh, our manager, and John Wick was just about to come out. It was like 2015. It was just about to come out. And he was talking about how, Derek had he'd gotten credit for a movie, but don't think it was amazingly successful. And he was like almost done.
Right.
And Josh said, just give me one more script. Just give me one more. Just one more. And if this one doesn't go, then no harm, no foul. Each go our separate ways.
Right.
And that script was John Wick.
Yeah.
And John Wick has become, we were just discussing yesterday, this absolute phenomenon. Not only did the trailer for John Wick Chapter 4 just drop, but also The Ballerina is filming, which is the spin-off of it. Yep. There is the Continental TV show. Yep. There are video games. There are Funko dolls. It's become this thing. It revitalized Keanu Reeves' career.
It's part of pop culture now.
It's part of pop
which is amazing because not all movies, even successful ones, break through. Right. It's funny. We were talking about Avatar and how, I'm excited to see the new Avatar.
Yeah.
But something Avatar did not do was break through the pop culture barrier
That's right.
and become this kind of thing that, yeah, people were talking about it while it was out. But
Yes.
after it was out, when it left the theaters,
it didn't impact culture. Yeah, it doesn't mean it wasn't a great movie. It just means it didn't impact culture in the way
John
that some
Wick
movies did. Yeah,
absolutely has impacted pop culture.
Yeah.
It is fully like part of like when someone looks back at the movies of like the 2010s and 2020s, the John Wick franchise will be part of that conversation.
Completely. Yeah.
It's great. And I can't wait to see all the other stuff he's doing. I love Splinter Cell as a game. So
I'm super excited for Splinter Cell.
And Nobody is, I love, if you haven't seen Nobody, it's
check out Nobody.
It's so fun. Go see Nobody. Anyway, we've got, we're really fortunate to have done The Princess with him. He was a great partner on The Princess. Everyone who just watched that can see how just cool and chill he is.
Yeah, and that's the way he is all of the time.
Yeah,
that's the way he is with producers. That's why he's just such a dude. He's great.
Definitely not us.
No,
definitely not.
Totally not us. We're just a pair of fucking assholes.
We're just fucking crazy. But yeah, I hope everyone liked that interview. I think, I mean, I'd like to try and continue regularly having interviews. We still have, a lot of wonderful people that we know that I would love to know how they do things. You know what I found the most interesting about that conversation in the context of what we're doing in this podcast? His process is totally different than ours.
Yeah.
And I love that.
I do too.
And
that's it, is that there is no one way to write a screenplay. He gets an idea, he has an idea, and he just starts putting it down. If he's speccing it, just starts putting it down.
Yeah. And like just literally writing fade in. And I got to be honest, like I've tried that. We collectively have tried that.
Yeah.
And it's hard. It's hard to not have to not even know where it ends.
Yeah.
And you just go, I know I want to write this story. I don't have the answers yet, but I'm just going to get into this script.
Yeah, I find it to be interesting. And I think what I find to be a challenge, why I would find that to be really scary, is because I feel like screenplays are different than, say, novels, for example.
Yeah.
I've been talking a little bit this week about Stephen King's On Writing, which I've been listening to a lot lately. And he literally just goes, I've got this concept, I've got this idea, and I'm just going to sit with the characters and the world and the interesting scenario that I've created, and I'm going to let that kind of come through me onto the page.
Right.
And I kind of feel like it's okay when you're writing a book because you haven't got 110 pages to do it in.
Yeah.
You can go, if this book's going to be 160,000 pages long, that's what it's meant to be. And I think it's different for that kind of narrative form. With screenplays, I feel like you have to know where you're going. And maybe Derek does know where he's going. Maybe he's like, here's a concept. I know how it's going to end. And I'll figure out how we get there,
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I also think it was interesting that he's like, his first draft's so long. Like what you're saying, it's like, he knows they're long. That's okay.
Yeah.
First drafts can be long.
Right.
And then also something that was interesting to me is that he gets notes from his agents, which is not something we've ever been good at.
No.
And partly, I don't, there's different kinds of agents. I think some agents like to give notes and some agents aren't really notes givers.
Perhaps sometimes they're good at it and perhaps sometimes
our first agent had no interest in giving notes.
No.
But it was interesting. I think the benefit probably of going, hey, I'm not going anywhere with this script until the people I trust with my career give me their feedback first.
Yeah.
And that the complete removal of ego to going, you do understand certain things that I don't. You do contribute things that I don't. You know things.
For sure.
And I want to hear them. And like you said, I don't have to take all of them.
Right.
I can go, you know what? I'm going to put that on the table. I'm not going to address it right now, but it's a great thing to think about.
Yeah.
And that's really wise. You know, it can be frustrating when you've spent so long writing a script. You've gotten notes from, I mean, we get notes from Josh as well. We do usually send him the script first.
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
Or if you're working on it with a producer and we're getting notes for the producer, which might be a little bit different. I don't know that agents will weigh in quite as much if you've got a big producer that's already weighing in. Everyone wants to kind of defer to what the producer is going to do. But we've kind of always resisted wanting agent notes.
Yeah, we have. And it's interesting is I would be intrigued to know if any of our agents at any point would have and could have feedback. I mean, it's been interesting. We've only really taken out like the amount of specs that we have taken out.
Well, I mean, we've shown them a few drafts of certain things.
Yep.
We got a little bit of feedback on one of them.
Yes, we did.
We got a little bit of feedback way later on the same one that we didn't actually know was there, but we found out later on.
Yeah, sure.
And then the other one we got no feedback on. Yeah. And it wasn't that we said we don't want feedback, although I think at one point you might have actually said we only want a little bit of feedback. You might have actually said that. Yeah. But
I'm really looking for feedback right now.
Yeah, I think that might have been what you said. We're really happy with this, and we're not looking for feedback. We just want you to read it.
That was a really dumb thing to say.
Yeah, but it's all learning, and I think that's I think that's one of the benefits of having these interviews. Hearing that that's what he does, I go,
yeah, and of course he is immensely successful.
So I love Derek. I would love to have his career, you know. And he is an inspiration to me.
Yeah, he has been an inspiration to me too.
And so when I hear I don't know that I'll ever start a script without even outlining Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, and where my midpoint is, and having a broad idea.
Yeah.
So okay, God bless. But the other things I go, actually, that's cool.
Yeah,
that could work.
The really good takeaway for me as well, I mentioned it in the interview, was just the way that you view those things that you didn't finish and that you didn't do.
They're not failures.
No, they're not failures.
We really talked about that a lot recently.
Yeah, absolutely. It was interesting. We came back to a conversation about a character yesterday, a historical character that we had talked about 11 or 12 years ago, that I'd begun to do a little bit of work on script and then completely dropped and let go. And gone, wow, literally sat in an obscure folder in my computer that we were suddenly talking about yesterday. And I suddenly got here's all the research I did about this thing. And we were talking about, not that we're jumping into that right now, but that there was, again, you might start something, starts something like that's not
never wasted time.
There's never wasted time.
Never wasted time writing. There can be wasted time on social media.
There can be.
Hopefully you're not wasting your time watching us right now, but there is never wasted time writing. Totally. I mean, even if it's just a little bit of sharpening that sword. I like the way he phrased that.
Yeah.
So that being said, let's see if we can do a little bit. I think this session will probably go a little long today, and I think that's okay. We'll cut out the interview portion.
Yeah, we'll do a separate
so that people can just watch that if they want. And for anyone who wants to stick around right now and watch us sharpen our sword, let's do it.
Let's do it.
How did we leave off yesterday? I'm trying to remember exactly. We were in Act 2. We actually wrote some of that first.
We did. We worked through some of that. Some of that section. I'm having
expositional aspect.
As I was lying awake last night, as I so frequently do, I was having a question about the emotional truth of Hank's acceptance to work with this demon so easily, so quickly. And I just wanted to just talk it through, even if we come to the same place. Sure. I just want to talk through the emotional logic of that.
Okay, great.
So let's just talk. Yeah.
I think that you're right. He can't come to it too easily. And I think that it'll be important for us to show that he's not okay with
Yeah.
that. And that, in fact, I think what could be cool is that Charlize and Hank are both a bit on edge around each other.
Right. Right.
It's an uneasy truce
Mm-hmm.
that they
Yes.
need to agree to for now. And he
Yeah,
says,
I think that's really important.
I
think it's really
am not going to say I'm not going to kill you, but
Right.
I'm not going to do it now. And
Yeah.
then over the course of the journey, that he actually realizes that she's a good demon, whatever that might be.
Whatever that might be.
And she
Yeah.
actually realizes that and understands why he would do what he does and is not doesn't hate
Yeah.
him in the way that she might.
Yeah.
But
But I
agree.
suppose
It
then,
needs to
yeah.
be the I should kill you. I should kill you too. But they're worse, and she needs to be taken care of. So are we going to do this together? Are we like maybe there's even a moment of are we going to do this?
Yeah.
Or are
And
we
there's
going to fight it out?
And there's a speed because obviously this scene is happening fast.
Sure.
You know, so I just wanted to make sure that because of the external pressures of Zod and his crew, and then the police showing up, that in that moment, and again, I'm just talking things through,
Yeah.
and also just back to it. Okay, so Hank has turned up, and remind me.
He ties up the boyfriend.
She's there first.
He's there first.
He's the first. So he has arrived.
Yes.
He's knocked out the boyfriend, whatever. He's got Sam on the ground.
He's in the middle of almost killing her.
He's about to. He has
She's
found
begging
that
for
this
her
person
life.
is this, you know,
the thing that he was
focus of demonic energy.
Mhm.
It's I found her. Thank goodness.
I'm gonna kill her. Has the mark. I know the mark is what
She's
I'm.
She's got the mark. Yes. Then in bursts a demon. I'm almost expecting this.
Of course, because the demons would want her.
Because the demons would want her.
I think that Charlize is actually Zod.
Absolutely right. You know. Absolutely right. She comes in. They have a brief fight, brief moment of something. And then Charlize is like, I'm going to kill her. And that's the big moment, isn't it? That's the big moment of, wait, you're going to do what?
Right.
And she's like, I'm not one of them anymore. I'm actually trying to stop this from happening. And he's like, well, that's what I'm trying to do.
Right.
That's weird. Before that can get fully resolved, Zod and the crew turn up.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that moment that you're talking about, wait a minute, you and I are both here for the same reason. I think that moment needs to be expanded out just to understand this. Like Charlize with urgency can say, there's no question that the other demons are coming. So either we're going to kill her right now or we're not, but we need to make a decision. And Hank going, there's something like Hank cannot trust her. Like, why do you want to kill her? Maybe the teachings are wrong. Are you actually trying to make her the Antichrist?
And like, you know, demons are wily and sow confusion. This is what they do. This is all part of what you do.
And I think that this conversation, this face-off, I mean, like, think about for a moment. I've got a gun to your head. You've got a gun to my head.
Right.
We could kill each other right now, or we could help each other. And that's ultimately what it comes down to. When Zod comes in, it's are we going to do this or aren't we? Because we have to decide right now.
Right. And in the middle of all this, there's a 21-year-old girl. Human being.
Yeah. Who's been knocked out on the floor.
Who's been knocked out on the floor. But the simplest version of it for both of them is bang.
Yes.
But that's not what they're going to do.
Right.
Now, Hank might be, then fine, let's stop pointing the gun at each other and point it at her. And Charlize says, wait.
Right.
There's something about her. I just went to, she's not turned yet.
Yeah, not yet. We need
not
to talk.
Yet. And she's like, I'm just going to show you this really quickly. I'm going to go down on the ground. and I'm going to show you the mark isn't done. Something like that. There is a reason that Hank's like, fuck.
And I think that, we have a similar beat that we just wrote.
I know we do. Yes, I know.
When they get there. But I think that's okay because it's about the fact that she is turning more.
Right.
And so while I think what that actually does for us is show that there is time.
Yes.
That when she first shows Hank the symbol is like, and we've looked at the symbol and it's got like multiple aspects and markings of it, right?
Yeah.
When she first shows Hank, it's not fully formed, it's not fully dark. Yeah. And then when they open up the trunk and it is more formed, but still not complete.
Yes. And there, I think, is a moment here, and it's what we were talking about a couple of sessions ago about Sarah Connor in Terminator 2 for a brief period of time becoming a Terminator. And that's something that she's like, oh, fuck, I was almost this kind of person. And I think Charlize says it here. She's like, yes, you could put a bullet in her head right now, but she's not this being of ultimate darkness yet. She's a young girl who just lost her family. If you put a bullet in this innocent girl's head right now, you're no better than the people you've been trying to stop this whole time. And I think that should hit Hank in that moment, even if it's just enough to give him pause.
Yeah, because I don't think he should believe her yet.
I agree. But it's just enough to make him not pull the trigger.
Wait, like, if you are right, in the 1% chance that you're not trying to fool me, then I would have killed an innocent person, and that's not who I am.
Absolutely right. Yes. And so I was just getting into wanting that.
It's that scene. It's that push and pull. It's after we've knocked Sam out.
Yeah.
And before Zod arrives.
Yeah.
We have what ultimately becomes an uneasy truce. That then continues into we get to the used car lot.
Yes.
And at that point they go, and I think it expands out that scene.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to try and reverse this.
Yes.
Do you want to help me or not?
Yeah.
And him going, there's no way I can work with a demon. And her saying, well, we both have every reason to kill each other, but can we at least wait until we save the world?
Yes.
Like,
totally.
We can get back to our argument later, but at least for now, let's save the world. Okay.
Right. And I think just through talking it out right now, that's what we just need in that. And that's just what I was looking for. It's not like a kind of like, okay, I'll come with you then to pop her in the car and it's going to
totally.
Yeah.
Well, let's add that into the outline. I'm going to pull it out. And just throw those ideas in there because that way,
that way it's written down and we won't forget it tomorrow.
Which happens all the time. So basically, just going back here to Charlize and Hank, it's going to be the doors kicked open. Charlize, Hank fires at her. Da 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 da.
Yes.
So. When does in
the standoff we get the fun banter of why are you here? No, why are you here? They both came to kill her, they both came to kill her. For Hank, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
She's a demon. You're trying to trick me.
Right.
I know what you're up to.
Yeah, you're tricking me. Some.
Yeah, totally.
Is this a trick? And then it's basically she shows the mark. The mark isn't complete.
That's right. There's still hope. If you kill this girl right now, you'll be just as bad as
you'll be just like a demon.
Yes. Before the question gives him pause, and in that pause, Zod and the gang show up.
And they have to decide, this is there has to be a moment.
Yes.
Are we
yes. And
out?
Charlize can prove her allegiance, prove what side she's on
fighting
Zod.
Yes.
Which makes Hank go, okay, maybe what you're saying is true. I'll deal with the consequences.
Enemy of my enemy.
Yeah. I think
As
we
my
wrote that
friend
somewhere else as well.
for
but
now.
Yeah, for now.
And then in the parking lot, it's going to be, we can either essentially before this, when they're fighting over like, I should kill you right now, we can put that away.
Yeah.
While they're in the car here, right? Exposition, stakes of Sam, Antichrist in the trunk. Hank should kill Charlize.
Right. It would make this all easy.
And vice versa. Charlize
Totally.
kill him.
And ultimately, that's it, isn't it? It's like there would be a really easy end to this, but it would be morally ambiguous. And Hank might hate himself for the rest of his life if he killed Sam in this
Well, I
moment,
mean, I'm not talking about Sam in the car. I'm talking about Charlize in the car. Yeah. And that it's the idea of, yes, we're on opposite sides. Right. You're a Nazi and I'm an American. But for this particular moment, we're going to work together because actually...
It's the SS or worse. Yeah, whatever it is.
Yeah, whatever it is. It's that that book you talked about.
That's
when they
right.
In the castle, you know, it's that thing of, you know, but the world is at stake.
Totally. And it's like, as you can see, I'm fighting against them. You want to go up against them on your own?
And we put aside our differences until we save it.
Yes.
Then we can fight.
Yes.
Because they've already fought also. And we know that they're relatively equally matched because Hank has his gear and Charlie is the demon. So it's like, look, we can finish what we started later, but let's just put that off.
Yeah, totally. Great. Awesome.
Great.
That really helps us just combat that feeling I was just having, just about making sure that moment, because it's a great moment. It's a really great moment. And ultimately, it's in this version of the log line that we talk about, which is demon hunter and a demon team up to save the life of the Antichrist.
Yeah. But it's an uneasy alliance.
Yeah, and that's difficult.
You know, it's like a demon and a demon hunter make an uneasy truce.
Yeah.
In order to, you know, to save the Antichrist.
Yeah, totally.
Which I think, you know, is still really cool.
Yes, I do. Yeah, cool.
Great. And the next thing that we talked about, we had just started to talk, and I know we're over our hour right now, but we had just started to talk yesterday about where they go next. And one of the things that I had pitched was, do they go back to Charlize's bookstore?
And I think that's nice. I think it helps out budgetarily as well. It's a location we can use again. She's got.
And then does Zod attack them then at the bookstore? Or is it good? I don't want to have repetitive set.
I know, and that's it. You don't have repetitive.
And what's interesting about movies like The Terminator is, yes, the Terminator is always coming for them. Yes, it's a gunfight. And yet, because of the locations and because of the way it's crafted, they never feel repetitive.
No, they don't. I mean, going to Terminator 2 for a second, let's just look at it. You know, the first one is
Terminator 2 even more so doesn't feel repetitive.
That's right. So T-1000 is looking for John Connor, locates John Connor in the mall.
Mm-hmm.
Arnie shows up, protects him. They flee through the LA River. They go.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome chase. Awesome sequence. Super fun.
Amazing.
They then decide what they're going to do. John says, we have to go and get my mom.
Right.
And Arnie says, no, that's the first place he'll go.
And he says, I don't care.
He says, I don't care. I order you to go and do this thing. So he goes, okay. They go and break out mum from, and what's so kind of coincidental.
We've talked through the plot of this movie.
But there's this whole sequence there.
Yeah.
Then the other part is we then go and do this. There are these.
The point is, each set piece
has a different intention. It's not just running.
No, but although they all end with, and now we're back on the run. Yes. They start with, we have a goal, and they end with, now we're running. Now in the first Terminator, it's we're running the whole time.
It's different.
But because of where the set pieces take place,
Yeah.
they also feel different. He's not just going to get them in, another chase. He's attacking a police station.
Sure.
You
Sure.
know, there's the.
So I guess the kind of where my questions go are, if we're going back to Charlize's bookstore, what becomes the obstacle, either when we're there or on our way to there? Does it have to be Zod and the Demons? Sounds like a great name for a punk band. Or is it the police, for example? I know we've had the police in this previous sequence, so maybe that's not right. And how is that obstacle activated en route to or at the next location that we're going to, the next place that we're going to?
How much do you think we have space in this to create the police as a real, true obstacle? Because
I'm not sure we do.
Well,
No.
the reason I ask is because at the moment, I mean, like, if you think about the first Terminator, you end up with scenes, you cut away from the main story, and although the main story is playing out in the background, where you're actually just with the cops.
True.
Especially towards the beginning of their involvement.
Yes.
And if we wanted the cops to be their own obstacle, I feel like you need a character specifically that is the way into them.
Mm-hmm.
It could be interesting to do that. I mean, for example, if this is a kidnapping, then it's not just the police, perhaps. It's the FBI.
Totally.
And you have an FBI agent coming in. And then they're following them across state lines.
Yeah.
And they're tracking them.
It would be, here's the thing, isn't it? Is you go, Charlize arrived in her car while they're not in her car when they flee. The cops saw her get out her car on CCTV and they go, where's it registered? It's registered right there.
Exactly.
There's a very easy way to
the next set piece that the FBI is got her store staked out.
Yeah.
And when they show up, it's a little confusing because Sam is actually walking with them, and yet do we cut from here, I guess is my point, to our new FBI agent in charge of Sam's kidnapping?
Maybe we do. It's a question. I'd like to sit with it because, again, thinking about Midnight Run, there are lots of pieces at play in Midnight Run. There's the mob, there are the FBI. Right. You have this two-pronged, and then there's another guy coming after him as well. There's another quote-unquote bounty hunter coming after him as well.
I like that.
And I do too. And it doesn't...
keep it fresh.
Yeah, and it's not about making it complicated. The through line is still simple, but it's what are the obstacles in the way? It's
creating new obstacles. Yeah. And actually, what's interesting too is if the FBI is fully engaged, they become an obstacle to Zod as well.
Oh, totally.
And then you've got two bad.
Then they can go at it.
And the FBI isn't bad. They're actually trying to help Sam. Yeah. So there's also the conflict of, we don't want to hurt them. They're just doing their job. They don't understand what's going on.
Yeah.
But Zod has no issue hurting them.
Right.
We get blamed for what Zod potentially
that's really interesting. That's cool. Great.
Something really cool about making the obstacle, while you're right, the through line of the plot is the same. The obstacles become really complicated.
Yes. Totally. We still know what we're trying to do. And now there are just more people trying to stop us. I think that's interesting.
Yeah.
I think we should dive into that next week, though.
Cool. Yeah, it is. I forgot it's Friday.
It is Friday.
So can we just put here, though?
Yes.
FBI gets involved. Now, conflicts, obstacles become more complicated.
Yeah.
They find her car.
Yes. They know where she, They know
maybe they're interviewing her boyfriend, who she lives with.
That's interesting.
And if she does live with him, then the red car registration is at his house.
That's right. That's right.
And so we get another scene where we bring him back in.
Yeah, completely.
Again, I love when you can create subplots. That's one thing that I feel like some movies are really missing these days.
Yeah.
Is interesting subplots and characters. The subplot of Charlize's relationship with this other guy is really interesting.
Totally.
You know,
then it's going to become a big complication for her, which is like,
I don't want him to get killed.
And what were you doing?
You
went off one day, had no idea where you went, and then the FBI is saying you kidnapped a girl?
What if Zod ends up kidnapping boyfriend and
that's
kid?
great. Yeah, that's great. That's great.
And then they want to do a prisoner exchange.
Totally. It's fun.
That's really fun. You know, I'll put a question mark. Zod kidnaps boyfriend and kid, question mark. But like, I love when there's a really, and you don't have to have more than one.
No.
But even the FBI agent, if he becomes like if he's the Tommy Lee Jones from The Fugitive,
totally,
then I'm super into what he's doing.
Yeah,
and I know, and what's great about that is I know that Charlize and Hank are trying to do the right thing, but he doesn't.
Completely right. Again, it's just like the Terminator, that first one.
Yes.
They don't know that Carl Reese is doing the right thing.
Right.
They get in the way. Yeah, for
totally.
Sure. Yeah.
Awesome.
Cool.
Well, this was really great.
Great.
I hope everyone enjoyed our interview with Mr. Kolstad. I think we'll probably talk about who we can have on maybe even next week.
Let's see.
Try and see if we can do this either a weekly, bi-weekly thing where we have another screenwriter on to tell them their process. So far, Dave and Derek have totally different processes, and we have a different process from them. And I think that's I think that can be really educational for writers.
Absolutely. So, all right, dude. Good stuff today.
That's the end of Ben and Jake Write a Movie for today. So
Sure is.
All right. Bye, everybody.